Welcome back to Montana Family Homestead. I'm Mary Mullet, and today we're deep in the backwoods of Montana visiting our good friend Michael Jones. He lives completely off-grid with his trusty alpaca named Goober. Michael's homestead is a true self-reliant lifestyle. He has solar power. And then stay with us later in the video when we sit down with Michael as he shares his remarkable journey, how he went from being homeless to building a life and raising a family. It's a beautiful Monday, and we're on our way to see Grandpa Jones.
And Goober.
And Goober. Got my cup of coffee here.
You'll have to figure out who Goober is.
Yes.
Goober was rescued during the December flooding that we had. Goober's partner didn't make it, but Goober is doing okay, and he has some characteristics of a dog. He likes to ride in the back of a pickup truck and almost causes accidents when he drives through town with him because people are not used to seeing Goober on the back of the truck.
Yes, yes. So we want to show you Michael Jones and his friend Goober. It's warm.
55 degrees.
Marvin was out planting the garden, some of it.
Got 4 rows in. I have some. One row has lettuce, 2 different kinds of radishes. And then I have 2.5 rows of onions that I have planted.
Yep.
I did not plant any carrots yet. I'm not quite sure where I want them.
Our school is going to be letting out here in just a few days. And you're probably thinking, wow, that's early for school to let out.
So in Montana, we have a quota. The school has to have
A certain
amount of days. And if you don't take a long Christmas break, just a few days for Christmas break, and you don't have spring break, all those days that a lot of people take off, well, guess what? We're not getting off earlier. I remember our school, where I went to school in Wisconsin, we started, I can't remember the start date, but we'd have off about a week or so. We'd have off between Christmas and New Year's. And then that was it. And I remember having school, I think, half a day Saturdays, because it was a farming community, and the farmers like, no, school needs to let out at this day because they just don't have the time to. So anyway, they wanted the school kids out of school to help with the farm work. Well, I remember quite a few times that and we rode the local bus. All the kids got picked up with a bus, hauled into town, and then took a different bus and hauled all the Amish kids out to our school. And we would let out about 3 weeks earlier than the public school, and the kids just could not. So like, how do you guys get by with so many less days? Well, we didn't take breaks.
Yeah.
We didn't have a week and a half spring break. We didn't have 2.5 weeks on Christmas. So.
And Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Yep. It was just a short break on Thanksgiving, short break on Christmas, and we don't get spring break. And we try to have as few snow days as possible. This is our schoolhouse, and we're so excited because summer is just around the corner and it's almost the last day of school. We're here at the schoolhouse picking up the boys.
It screeched.
Because they all want to go see Michael Jones.
And Goober.
And Goober. Boys, did you have a good day at school today?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Daniel had a geography test.
Alrighty. When you just salute.
This is our good friend Michael Jones. He lives off-grid in a little cabin way back in the woods. He is a true Montana mountain man.
A couple of years back, there was this old wooden shotgun up on the wall, and it's not a real shotgun. It's just somebody made this thing to look like a big shotgun. Remember that thing up on the wall? Okay, one day went out the back door, and Orla was out there getting some boxes. I don't know what triggered me. I ran and got that shotgun, and I ran out there with it and pointed it right at him, and I said, hold it right. Could have knocked his eyeballs off with a stick. Somebody's got to bring a little excitement into these old timers' lives. But Orpha always got a kick out of things. How does my hair look? Did you have to have AI to help?
No.
So we didn't get it on camera. So Michael was living in mountain man fashion, and this little girl called Amity tells him he needs a haircut. And so she got a scissors and she gave him a haircut.
Hey, it was quick.
How old is Amity?
10.
It's like 10 years old.
And what did she do?
Well, she came over. Her mom went up to clean Becca's house, so she said, "Amity, go down and visit Mike." So here she comes, and I was having a tough time, and all of a sudden that time started changing. She was there for like 2 hours or so. Well, I had these little pair of bear paw snowshoes I told her about that I had saved for her, and I finally found them now that all the snow is gone. Well, she wanted to try them out. So walking around on the mud, she just loved them. So she says, "Well, I'm starting to get a little tired. What do you want to do now?" And I says, "Well, I got a fishing pole over there and I got some worms. And I got a trail down to the creek." She says, "Maybe we could go catch a fish." And I says, "Well, we do. We're going to eat him." So we ate him up in the cabin, the fish, first fish that she caught. So we're sitting there eating this fish and we're kind of talking, and she says, "You know, your hair's getting kind of scraggly or something." She says, "Your hair is getting kind of," and I says, "Yeah, I know." And I says, "One of these days I'll," and she says, "Got a pair of scissors?" And I says, "What are you thinking?" She says, "Well, I could cut it." And I says, "To have you up?" And she says, "No." I says, I was just kind of shaking my head. So she's kind of prattling on there a little bit. And I says, "Okay." I says, "Maybe there's something wrong with me here. Maybe it's just rich faith. I'm crazy, or I need an adrenaline fix. I don't know. But okay, let's do it." So I thought that was a little snip here, a little snip there, maybe just all these little snips and it would be over with. I had all these curly locks in the back, you know, about this long back there. And she walked right up with that pair of scissors and 3 snips, all gone. Just like that. So I'm standing there, I'm a little shocked. So anyway, I says, "Well, is that it?" And I'm afraid, well, maybe, I don't know if I want any more here, but anyway, she gave a few more snips and she says, "Well, I'm all done." And I says, "Well," I got the mirror and looked and I thought, okay, people laugh at me. I'm going to tell them it's all you. So anyway, I think she needs to finish the job. So I found some clippers today, the electric kind. I told her mom, I says, "You know, she's halfway there. And I mean, she's bold enough to cut people's hair." I mean, you know, so I guess now somebody's got to be there to coach her because I don't want to be bald or anything. But
She might have you looking like her dad.
I probably better rethink all this.
So I think a little supervision would probably be good.
I need a little help. I don't know if I'm worse than I were. I don't say that anyway. But anyway, I've been pretending that I love it everywhere I go. Amity, she's such a kook. I think I finally met my match. How come my giants now are only this big?
Well, talking about haircuts, I got an invite to go hunt elk in Colorado in 2002. It was a short deal, like no year plan, no nothing. All of a sudden, like, "You want to go?" Like, I don't know. I didn't have a gun that was big enough for elk. Ended up going to the pawn shop, getting a 7mm Remington Magnum. I bought this little $7 backpack. They said, you need a backpack. Well, right? Onto that. We didn't need a pack. And I was getting a little scraggly. My hair gets real bushy when it gets long, like an afro. I was tired, and I was like, I'm gonna give myself a haircut before I go. And it was at the end of a long day, and I'm like, you know, I have a clipper with different gauges on it. And I clipped the thing on, and I like, subconsciously, I thought I heard something fall. And I usually started back here, like going like this. Like, man, this thing is dull. And all of a sudden, I had this whole quarter done back here. I stopped like, what did I hear fall down? I felt back here and I felt no hair. It was all shaved off, like 1/16 of an inch long. I looked at it for a few times like, no, I didn't just do that. I must be dreaming. I pinched myself. No, you actually just shaved a back. What do I do now? Most people would have said, shave everything back there and just have a, which I probably would have done if I'd had it over. And so I turned around in the mirror and I looked, and my hair was pretty long. I had wavy hair. And it looked like somebody had cut the hair like this because of the waves. I had went straight, and I had only gotten, but yeah, anyway. So I cut it a 1/4 inch in the back, 1/4 inch on the side, 1/2 inch on top. And this was getting on to be wintertime. When I went outside, it felt like somebody would press in an ice pack right there. It was cold. And remember, I went out west to hunt elk. Everyone's like, what happened to you? Did you get hurt? Were you in an accident? Did you have to have surgery or something? I kept my beanie on as much as I could. And then we ended up going to a really conservative Mennonite church. These guys were conservative enough that they spoke the same dialect of German that we did. Maybe a little different, but we did. And I'm like, I'm going to have to go in there. You don't wear a hat in this church. And I sat all the way in the back and tried to, and people were very respectful. I've asked people later, did you guys notice? And some people, they didn't notice. I was so self-conscious of that. And to this day, when I think of the first time I went to hunt elk, it was like that back quarter of my head shaved. Oh my goodness.
Memories.
It was so fun hanging out with Michael Jones. This is part 4 of the interview we have done with Michael Jones. If you haven't heard part 1, 2, and 3, it may not make sense. So I encourage you, if you haven't watched the previous videos, go back and watch those first before you watch this one.
Susan's name was Princess. The tribe named her Wikininishsimika, which means princess. And her English name is Susan, which means Lily Grace. Hawaiians came from Hawaii to roast a pig in the ground at Waiwam. And we're waiting for that pig to get done in the ground, and all these Hawaiians putting on their show. And this woman comes walking up to me. This is after I'd been there half a year. 4 months in Nia Bay after the heart attack. Comes walking up to me and says, I would like to hear your heart for God. And so I said, oh, well, okay, sit down. And she says, well, when you first showed up in Nia Bay and you gave your testimony that first Friday night to the whole tribe and everybody, I was there and I want to hear more. Oh, I don't know how long we talked, probably a couple hours or so. And then she got up and left. I didn't know, I guess what she was thinking as she got up and left, that for the rest, something to the effect of that for the rest of her days, she would like to be following me. So it took me a while to heal up. The heart attack kept me there for a whole year. And I came to realize it was God keeping me there. In that year, I met Susan and we talked. And then after that, we visited more and more. Every now and then we just visit, catch each other at a cafeteria or something. I came to a place where I knew that God was moving me out of Nia Bay and back to Kalispell. And as time went on, I realized that this was actually happening. There was a confrontation with her husband who should have been in prison. There was some confrontations there. I left Nia Bay. I came back to Kalispell. I was staying at my dad's for a little bit in a camper. He was just being this jerk, like he didn't know how to be anything else. I told him that my whole life had been reduced down to this old black car that burned oil. I told him I'm getting in that car and I'm headed back to the coast. And he started mocking me and stuff. And he said these words. He said, "You'll never make it." Well, I took all the money out of my wallet. I dumped it all on his table, went out in the car and got every bit of food that I had. I got all my resources and laid them on his table. And I says, "I will make it." And I left. It passed right through Libby. As I was going through Libby, this tremendous peace was hitting me. And I noticed on the way to Troy that the peace was leaving. Well, I drove all the way to Sandpoint and thinking about this, and the peace was behind me, and more peace was behind me than was in front of me. So I parked it. I ended up pulling up the store in Sandpoint, and I pull up right in front of these two people that are having this conversation about Libby, and we're going back to Libby, and all this going back to Libby stuff. I look up at God and I said, "Whoa, am I supposed to?" Oh, I pulled the car out on the street and I looked this way and I looked that way. Libby's this way and the coast is that way. So I said, "Lord," and all of a sudden I was headed back to Libby. I came back this way, the peace started happening again. So I pulled into Libby, I went through Libby to the other end of Libby, headed towards Kalispell. Scott Orr used to, he had the recycling business on the other end of town. And so I pulled in there, I was turning around to go back into Libby, and he was out there in the parking lot. This guy, I rolled down some windows and I asked him some kind of instructions, and he says, "Why don't you park that car and come into my office?" Oh, okay, complete stranger in a complete strange town. Next thing I know, he's saying, "Why don't you tell me your story?" So I'm telling him my story. Maybe an hour, I don't know. He stands up, he gets out his wallet, he pulls out a $100 bill. He hands it to me. He says, "The Lord brought you to this town." He says, "This is to get you started." Well, he turned out to be the state representative of Montana, the second one that I became friends with. The first one, him and his wife, Bonnie and Clyde Smith, Kalispell, Montana. Anyway, but he was the first state representative. I came back to Libby. With that $100 bill, I got to start in town because I got to get gas, got a little bit of food. I pulled in here by Rosars. There's a city park there. And I pulled in there and I thought, well, I'll sleep on the ground here by my car. So I pulled up next to this large tree and I parked a little camping spot, slept on the ground. Well, I ended up sleeping maybe 2 months there on the ground under that tree. There's an old bum another bum. And anyway, he was sleeping over there, and he's an old guy. And we met, and he turned out to be a nuclear physicist that worked on the Long Island disaster, the nuclear disaster. After that disaster, he became like a bum, an alcoholic, and just spent the rest of his life wandering the country. So we met. There was a little church down by the park. And we could hear them singing Sunday mornings. They'd be over there singing Sunday mornings. And there was a few more other people sleeping in the park. I kept wondering about all these people over there singing, and there's all these happy little songs in their church and stuff. And finally one day I just walked over there, and I walked into the church, and the pastor was up there talking, and I kind of went up there and stood beside him. So he kind of looking at me, and he's kind of like, "What?" And I started out, I says, "You see all them people over there in that park?" I says, "Where's your mission field?" I gave him a little sermon. For the next week, there were no bums in that park. We all had more food and blankets and you name it. Anyway, so little Amity, she's as bold as a lion. Yeah, I guess I have the same problem, but gosh. But I had contacted Susan and things were going downhill there. There was a Christian couple that came walking through the park, an old man and lady. And I was sitting at a table writing a letter, picnic table. And they came walking right up to me and sat down at that table and says, hey, we want to talk. We want to visit with you. And okay. So, wow, they were, whatever happened, they says, we got a little house right up beside our house. Nobody's living in it. You come live in it. It's a house. We want you living in it. Well, I says, I got a friend right over there, and said, well, get him. Both of you guys move in that house. So me and old RL, Richard Stonebreaker, we moved into their little house right up on Idaho Street and not far from the park. So I'm writing Susan about this. Things are going downhill there, and I said, well, if you need to, come. And so she did. She loaded up a van full of kids, 4 kids, and came to Libby. Me and RL moved out of the house so that they can move in. I moved down the street. Somebody else let me live in a camper. I helped her get out of Nia Bay. Kind of helped her get set up here in town somewhat. Push come to shove, one thing after another, crying out loud. We're getting closer and closer. We finally end up getting married. My life before this, I knew how to raise dogs. I raised a couple of bears. I raised some wild critters, made them tame and things. I didn't know nothing about raising kids. And all of a sudden, I got 4 of them. And they're all Indian. They're all Indian. These kids were trained by their dad they didn't like white people. Their dad was very racial. So my name was Babucket. They point their finger and call me Babucket, white man. And so that's how we started out as a family. I'm the white man. Susan was a caretaker. We started taking care of a few old people in our house for some income, and her grandma was one of those. The state representative, Scott Orr, we ended up taking care of his uncle, and he died in our house. But anyway, we started raising those kids. I wasn't handling things well, but I built a big fence around the backyard. I built a tree house. I was desperate. I couldn't handle being in town. I don't like being in houses. I was climbing the walls, but managing somehow to still stay in town. So I said, people talking about my tree house, and I says, yeah, when I build clear to the top of these trees, I'm going to see how far the city owns underground, because we're going to go underground. So if I'm stuck here, but it turned out that the Lord didn't have us stuck there. This house right in the middle of Libby here and in town, taking care of these older people, and I'm learning about these kids that don't like me. The youngest one was 5 weeks old when he got to Libby. He wasn't mine. The other, Joe was 4, and Jesse was 6, and Julianne was 12. I had no idea how to raise kids at all, but now I got these little Indian kids in front of me, pointing at me, calling me Babucket. Well, I guess I tolerated that for a little bit. I remember being on my face a lot. I remember on my face saying these words, God, now what do I do? and I remember hearing back quite a few times, go and apologize. Okay, so I'm learning to, I go back to these kids and say, okay, I was wrong, or I did that wrong, and I thought, well, that's not helping our relationship any, being the fool. Well, I had no idea that all this honesty is exactly what they needed. So I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. I just started doing my thing, gardening and taking them out in the woods and always going after firewood, always never stop, always doing something. So these kids are kind of having to do all this stuff with me when they get out of school. Mom's homeschooling them. After their homeschool, they were mine for the rest of the day. Julianne, with the oldest one, I thought she probably hated me more than the rest. And I thought, well, that's okay. She's 12. She'll be leaving the house 5 years. She'll be gone. So I put most of my efforts toward the boys. Well, she was the very first one. One day I was out in the yard and she walked right up to me and said, "You're my dad." I said, "What?" She says, "You're my dad." I says, "I am not your dad." She says, "Yes, you are." And I says, "My name is Michael, or Babucket." She says, "No, you're my dad." So I didn't know what to do with that. she walked off and went and talked to her mom. So mom came out and said, she really thinks that you're her dad. And is it, I says, well, I'm not her dad. You only get one of those in this world and she's already got one. So, well, could she call you Papa? Well, it took me, I don't know, days or something. I finally came back with an answer. Okay. Immediately after that, the boys started calling me Papa. Okay, I didn't quite know what to do with that, but okay, all right. So I'm still having heart problems. I've had them my whole life. When we got married, Susan already knew about my heart problems, seen me go through some horrible stuff already. I figured that I would probably die within a year after the heart attack. It was looking that way, but she married me anyway. She figured I'll probably be with him for about a year, maybe, if I'm lucky. I've been a logger and a tree man my whole life long, and we didn't have much to start, but I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to see if I can cut a few trees in this town, make a little money. Well, all of a sudden, we're in the business, me and these kids, growing quick. We put together a tree business in the town. The other tree business would mock us, laugh at us. Me and these little kids with this beat-up little Datsun truck, we start in the business, he would laugh at us. But when the microburst came, he came to us and says, I have trees here. I have no idea how to get them down over these houses. If you think you can. We got them all down with just a little chainsaw winch. Anyway, he respected us after that. Matter of factly, this whole town watched those kids, those little kids. Me and those little kids, we'd go in and make this big mess in somebody's yard, taking down all these big trees and pruning them, whatever. And we would clean up that yard so clean, it would just sparkle every time. Well, those kids, with God's help, who didn't like me one single bit, I can't hardly ever remember where the customer didn't hand me my money, and I would get paid some good money for doing this. And then they would say, give this to those kids. Sometimes it was $100. Give this to those kids. And every single customer said this. You go find the customers. They're still here, a lot of them. They would say this, how do you get those kids? How did you train up those kids like this? When you go to the dump with a load of branches, it's like you're still here. They don't change one bit. I mean, it's like, and they were so amazed with these little kids and kept tipping them all the time. Well, this business was actually a ministry, and the kids was what opened the door every time, because they would ask, how? What are you doing with these kids? Sometimes I would tell people, you know, I would, with a little bit of attitude, I say, well, I'm not raising kids, I'm training Marines. You know, so anyway, leave them with that. But, well, I can't forget about my daughter in Indonesia here too. I want to make sure that she's in here too, because I have a daughter from another marriage from before, and she ended up being a missionary in Indonesia. Now she's got 3 little girls. They're over there. Powerful ministry. They're coming. I have to mention all of my family here. So I have to get her in this picture too. Immediately I had a soft spot for Julianne because she was the first one that accepted me. I could see she was working at convincing me that, and I guess I was learning to think maybe this is real. Julianne has always been, she became my shadow, I would say. And there was some competition there, you know. She had brothers, and she was the oldest one of them all, but she had to outdo those brothers and everything. I would be filing a chainsaw. I would say, come over here and watch how this is done, you know, kids. What? Well, she would be the one right there watching, you know. Each one of them were these little kids. We had so much fun. We had our times of tension, sorrow, pain, but we was able to rise above that with the Lord's help and His love and His grace. We built a family. My kids, the ones I was raising, I'm a worker, so they became workers too. So we're always doing something, always building something. I told them this right from the beginning. I says, work, I'm holding up a tool belt here. And I says, work, I says, this is work. I says, each one of you are going to get a tool belt. So I went and bought all these tool belts. I bought hammers, saws. I bought all the stuff that goes in a tool belt. I cut hammer handles down short. I made belts smaller. I made all this to fit the kids. And I made them wear these tools. And these are your tools. And we're workers. And you're going to learn how to use these tools. Well, but I kept telling them over and over and over again, whoever thought of the idea that work might be something we have to do? Work is not something we have to do. Work is something we get to do. And I tell them that over and over again. I don't know how it impacted them, but something seemed to turn these little kids into working machines. People in town were impressed enough to throw down money at them. Now they're all bosses. Julianne, she's a mom, but all my boys ended up being bosses. Joe bosses 80 people sometimes. Jesse's running a construction outfit down in Billings. Me being flat on my face and saying these words, Lord, what do I do now? I had not a clue. And I would get a clue what to do, and I'd get up and go do it. Well, whatever happened in our family, for someone that didn't have any idea what to do, it turned out pretty good. Jesse and Joe, under Julianne, Jesse was older, Joe was just under him by 2 years. These two boys, my little knotheads, Josiah, he was still just a little baby, the little baby guy we called him, just goofing them off with these kids all the time. Joe was our little wild man. He was the guy that would test everything. I would say that, if a rule was created, Joe must have been created to test the rule. Because he does. That's what he does. If somebody says no, Joe's there to test it. So Joe became my little kangaroo. I called him my little kangaroo. Well, a Joey is a baby kangaroo, so that's part of it. He's my little kangaroo. But kangaroos bounce all over the place. They're uncontrollable, whatever. He's always been our little kangaroo, Joe. Anyway, love those kids. I miss them. Jesse, they were all definitely had different temperaments. Jesse's kind of got a little dark storm cloud around him a lot of times, a little bit of attitude. Joe is just this silly, bouncing around. Anyway, Joe loved to torment Jesse, and he would get him going. And you could always tell that something was happening because Jesse would say, Joe. A few minutes later, he'd say, Joe! Pretty soon it would be screaming out, Joe, and then all of a sudden there's something happening again. The silliness in our house. Me and Julianne, she liked to play the piano. So her and I would sit down and write songs. And some of our first songs was about Jesse and Joe. and tormenting them, So we wrote this song called Toilet Water, Jesse and Joe. So, and Joe being the little kangaroo, then his name changed to Towa for toilet water. He's our little Towa Joe. So, anyway, we had so much fun. But with all these ornery little people living in this house, just kind of having fun with one another, poking at each other, we had a lot of fun. The little baby guy, Josiah, he was bashful. He was, always behind mama's skirts and whatnot. And, Papa was just, anyway, I'm always coming after him, and messing around with him. Well, one day, the story goes, Susan came back and told me the story. Josiah was with me. I shot a deer, I guess. And for some reason, I went home. I left the deer in the woods. Went home, got Josiah. I went back out there to get that deer. So Josiah's sitting in the front seat. I stop the truck. I jump out of the truck, leave the door open, run out in the brush, come back with a deer and throw it in the back of the truck. And this was hunting season and that we were doing this in. He was so amazed. I had no idea what he was seeing. I just was getting our deer and headed home with it. But he went home and he told Mom. And Mom came back and told me. She says, Mom, Papa just caught a deer with his bare hands.
He didn't know you had harvested it. He just saw you run out and come back with it.
Papa just caught a deer with his bare hand. Anyway, we all laugh about that. And then Julianne, she was always my little shadow. I would take them all hunting, but Julianne, she'd get mad if she get left behind. I mean, she would just, wherever I'm going, I was training her to shoot a bow, and she's getting pretty good with a bow. And we got her a pretty good little bow, a good little hunting bow with just her size. She was getting good with it. So I wanted her to get her first deer, and it wasn't quite happening. This bear comes out of the woods, and starts walking right over toward us and coming straight at us. And Julianne grabs me by my arm. She, Papa, Papa. Pretty soon, the bear's a lot closer. Papa, Papa. So I let him get right up to us. Her first bear experience she was freaking out. But I jumped up and I said, "Hey, Mr. Bear, man," he made a smoke trail back for the timber. And so she was hyperventilating. So the next experience I had with her, I'm in the ditch cutting up this big log. We're out in the mountains, and we went out to get some firewood and stuff. And Julianne walks down the road, doing something while I'm cutting. And all of a sudden, I hear this horrendous sound, and I look up, and this look of horror is on her face, and screaming. And my saw is going and whatnot. I shut off the saw, and I can't discern all this sounds coming out of her face. And finally, I was able to, she's pointing down the road, and I thought she found a corpse. She found a rotting body. I mean, this is bad, whatever's going on. I mean, really bad. And we walked down the road. I'm kind of dragging her back to, and her first moose that she ever saw in her whole life. And he stuck his head out of the bushes, and I said, and I said, "It's just a moose." So we went back. Anyway, I forgot about first-time experiences, but these kids, we had a lot of first-time experiences. Anyway, but memories, yeah, we all have memories. We were in the tree cutting business. We went from one end of this town to the other, customers everywhere. We all end up a family. I was never too sure. Susan went out to the Amish store one time. We lived in town. She came back and she says, "I was out at the Amish store. This lady named Rebecca invited me in her house and was showing me things on her sewing machine." Rebecca Miller. Well, all of a sudden we're making a few trips out to the Amish. I guess I run into Elvie. I says, "I need a draw knife, peeling logs." I says, "You got one extra one laying around, I'll give you $100 for it." So he remembers that. He tells that story. But when we first met, well, pretty soon we're becoming friends with the Amish, and now they're loading up in vans. You guys are loading. Anyway, we were all younger then. They started coming and visiting us right in the middle of town. And we had these beautiful gardens in the back, this big tree house, and this big old house we're taking care of a few old people in. Well, they started showing up, and the big van would park in front of our house, and all these Amish people would unload in a great big Mountain Manors retirement home right across the street. All these old people out there sitting there watching us all the time. Now they're watching all these Amish go into our house. And so they were really wondering what's going on over there. They were always wondering that. The town fathers was already talking about us because I had log decks everywhere. I had sawmill, I had goats, I had chickens, I had 10 beehives, I had big tree house. I mean, and I told him, I said, as soon as we get to the top of these trees, we're going to find out how far we can go underground. We only got a postage stamp to live on here. So the town fathers were talking about us. So the Millers got a hold, Elvie, come out and look at a piece of property. I don't know how all this started, but we ended up looking at a piece of property out there that they were selling out here. The thing led to another. I bought a sawmill from the Amish. They were building sawmills right here in the community. I ended up buying one of those, and I'm already in the tree business. Me and them kids started cutting down trees and milling up lumber. Anyway, With the potential to build a house, they sold us a piece of property up here on the mountain, 13 acres. So we built a log house up there with their help. And me and these family of kids, we've already done work in town and bonded pretty much as a family, but now we're starting a new chapter up on this mountain. And now we're starting from scratch, building a home from nothing. We had a lot of fun. I found out that with the tools we had, I could cut a little heart into a board. And with a router, I could make it look really nice. And then you could make something, out of that board with a heart in it. Well, me and the boys found out right away the weakness of women. And I started thinking, Mom just loves these hearts. And, I guess they all do. So we started cutting out hearts, and she started liking the hearts. So we filled that whole house full of hearts everywhere, shelves, cupboards. The joke became, I always tell the boys, how do we build all this cool stuff, how do we get it past Mom to where we can go sell it? We would be millionaires by now if it wasn't for her. Everything we build ends up in her house. So it was kind of a joke. Anyway.
You had mentioned that the next time you saw your dad, he was going to have to come visit you in your brand new house. Give us just a little bit of a picture of that scenario.
We built this beautiful little place up there on the mountain, and it was kind of rough. It had its rough edges, but it was built in love. It was built with the best of what we had. We didn't have a ton of money, so anyway, I'm kind of a pack rat. I'm always, if I got a hobby going, I start collecting stuff for it. I'll put all that in a nutshell. We built a beautiful little barn, 2-story barn for $187. We made a book on it. How much this barn cost, and we had to pay $5 for gas, we'd mark it down in the book. We had to buy a screw, we marked it. It cost like $187 for that whole barn. And it was pretty darn cute. Building this beautiful little place up there, putting in gardens and stuff, one building after another, putting in a water system, all this stuff. All of a sudden, we're kind of getting things finished up there. We got a lot built. I get this notice that my dad wants to come visit. He brought my stepmom. They came to Libby to see me. I don't know if they were prepared to see what they saw or not, but we had this brand spanking new house looking straight at the Cabinet Mountains, the most beautiful views, like Switzerland. We had 13 acres, beautiful land, overlooking the Amish. It was just storybook, absolutely storybook. This man that I piled all my stuff on his table when last time I seen him, he had to come visit me, and he had to sit at my table now. And I got all these kids. He mocked me because I was getting into, he didn't want me to be involved with Indians. He was kind of racial. Anyway, he was eating humble pie he had to eat dinner with us. It had to have been the Lord that brought him. And he was getting old. I think he knew he might be dying. So I don't know, maybe he was trying to make amends or something. He came to visit me. I mean, it was rare. But now he has to look at all this stuff the Lord has put in my hand. This man told me twice in my life, you'll never make it. And I says, but you don't know God. And the next time he saw me after those words, it was like he didn't know what to say. You'll never make it? Yeah, say it again. Somebody please say those words. Never make it. Because if you say those words, you don't know this guy named God. All things are possible to those who believe. Even when we don't believe, he's believing for us. He's faithful when we're faithless. And then I got this phone call from him that he was dying. Susan said I preached for 3-4 hours. Well, with him on the phone. I kept saying, Dad, are you still there? Yep, I'm still there. And I go right on to preaching. I say, Dad, you know it's true. You know that it's true. You know when I came back from Los Angeles, you know. It scared you so bad, I preached to him. I said, you know. And I said, you are 1 inch away from God's throne right now. You know what the truth is. Man, I pounded him. And I said, Dad, are you still there? He wouldn't say a word. And, yep, I go right back to preaching. Susan said it was like 3-4 hours. I just was so thirsty. Very thirsty at the end of that one. But I heard this voice say, well, gotta go click. Now, I thought, oh, well, okay, that's Dad. Well, the very next day, he called up again. And Susan said for 45 more minutes, it was same thing as the day before, except it was only 45 minutes, and it was, Dad, are you still there? And finally, it was exactly the same. He says, gotta go. Click. He hung up. That was the last thing I heard him say. Well, after that, that was like the day before he died, I think. Right after that, he called a pastor friend that was also a fellow logger, but he was a logger that had become a pastor. But all the loggers in Kalispell knew him, and my dad. All of us know each other. So my dad called him up to the hospital room, and basically what I heard was he took my dad took this man by force, saying, show me what to do. Show me what to do. Show me what to... Well, this pastor guy says, Mike, I led your dad right into the kingdom of God, and you had everything to do with that. I'm pretty sure the next time we meet, it's going to be a lot different. My dad opened the door of his heart to the Lord Jesus. This is what the pastor told me. And let him come in and confessed his sins, said, I've been so wrong. You know, that's one thing I heard my dad say when he called me. One thing that he said, I'll remember. How could I ever be forgiven? Those words still hit me. How could I ever be forgiven? Well, I think that he was taught how to be forgiven. And I think that he was forgiven. That pastor friend led him to Jesus. My dad opened up the door of his heart and said, basically to God, whatever you can give me, I'm here. And if it's salvation, my dad let him in. And my dad became born again. My dad, at the last minute of his life, how many people miss that minute? At the last minute of his life, his name got written in the Lamb's Book of Life.
Wow.
Yeah. And at the last minute of his life, he said these words, how could I ever be forgiven? And he knew what he did to us. He knew what he did to other people. He'd been a hellion his whole life. So he must have had a lot of things on his mind to make him say, how could I ever be forgiven? Well, you know what? When Jesus comes in your heart, he brings forgiveness. And you find this peace that passes all understanding when you realize you have been forgiven. This book called the Bible is true. The stories in it is living. It is God in a book. Jesus knocking on the door of your heart, is he? God is real. Jesus Christ is real. To put this in words that are real, like well-driven nails into the heart. I sat in a prison where a lot of you are sitting right now. And depression, don't know what to do. Your whole life is unraveled upside down. You've been to all the hospitals, treatment centers, you've tried everything, and now what? You're losing hope. Yeah, so many people in that place right now. You know who you are. So many of us have been there, and some of us have been there so many times, there's no denying God. Because when death is certain and God brings you out of it over and over and over again, how can you deny? It's true. The Word of God is true. Jesus is true. You know, the Bible story is pretty wild, but it's the truth. You test it yourself and see if it's not true. You get your nose in that book, and then you point it to God and you say, God, I need to know. I just need to know. I don't think you need to say much more than that. The attitude, you want to know. That's enough for him. With all of your heart, what do you want? With all of your heart, what do you want? To die? To be a millionaire? With all of your heart, what do you want? Or just not to be depressed anymore? Not survive, but to have life instead of survival? It's offered to us. It's offered to us. It's offered to you. Don't die in the cocoon when God's offering you wings. He's offering us wings of freedom. He says, I'll set you free. There's no problem that he cannot set us free from. I know some people walk through hell their whole life long, but the Lord has brought them out with treasure every single time. Bruised but not crushed. We all get bruised, but with him, we never get crushed. He already did that for us on the cross. How can I make this real? I can't, but the Holy Spirit can. Mm-hmm. So I say this, Holy Spirit, are you with us here with this camera moment? Are you there with them and here with us? Are you everywhere? The Bible says you count our hairs. Every human being. Lose one, you count it. Saving our tears in a bottle. Are these just stories? Do you want to know whether this book is true or not? You know that you know that you know. It's possible. It's not a fairy tale. It's the living Word of God. How could you come to a place of knowing? Ask, seek, and knock. Ask Him. He hears every word, every sorrow, catches every tear, waiting, wooing. You ever feel that God might be wooing you? He might be moving you. Your whole life is just hard and bitter, but there's this sweetness in it that you don't know how to explain. Hang on to that sweetness. Hang on and call out His name. If you cannot call out His name, cry out something. He knows. He's a good interpreter. We're all trapped down here on this little dirt clod called Earth, spinning around the sun. Some of us are finding the way out of darkness. There's so many people that's in darkness, consumed by darkness. The Lord, He wants to make us children of light. You become born again, all you got to do is let Him in, say yes. My dad said, how could I be forgiven? You ever wonder that yourself? How could I be forgiven? Well, the book called the Bible is all about forgiveness. What He did on that cross is how you are forgiven. You have to trust that He took your sin. You don't have to take it yourself. He took it and He paid for it all. If you have that ability to believe, and even if you don't, He'll help you. You will stick another needle in your arm, or you're going to take a chance and cry out to God. You're going to run to the bar with your problems. What are you going to do? Somebody out there, you know what you're supposed to do. You know. Somehow you just know. So take my word for it. It's not about my word. It's about what's in this book called the Bible, the living Word of God. You take His word for it. Step out of the boat. Step out of your comfort zone. Try something scary, like say, God, are you really there? You do that under the stars, and I guess what? Yeah.